Welcome to the Isto James channel. I'm Isto James, and today I'm going to be showing you how to paint this awesome wintertime scene in about an hour. It's probably easier than you'd even expect. So let's go! Okay, so really quick before we jump in, let's talk about what we're gonna need to make this painting happen. First off, I have a 16 by 20 white canvas. Really doesn't matter what size you use. This will work with anything that you're painting on. As long as you can paint on it, you'll be in good shape. Let's talk about the colors though. That's probably the most important. The really cool thing about this painting is we don't need very many. It also does not matter what kind of paints that you have, whether it's level 1, level 3. This painting is for everybody, so as long as you have these colors, you should be good to go. White and black, that's a given. That one's pretty easy. And of course, our primary colors. So we have a blue, a yellow, and a red. I will be using phthalo blue in this painting just because it's my favorite, but any blue will really do for you. Next thing that you'll need is some paintbrushes. You can get away with almost none, not that far, but I use a nice big 1-inch or a 12, however you want to find that, to help just spread and make our background work. Then I have two brushes that are just like this, only smaller. I like to use the one that has an angle cut, but either one will do. Find what works nice for yourself. And then just a round detail brush. These sizes don't really matter so much, honestly. There's a lot of give and take with this painting that you should find pretty easy. Of course, you're gonna need a cup of water and then somewhere to put your paints. I prefer to use the plastic palettes because most of these come with a cover that you can put over it, and that works really well. But a paper plate will do just fine. This is no muss, no fuss type of deal. So you can put paint on there. When you're done with it, just throw it away. It's super easy. Then of course, a piece of chalk. I'm not going to give away the secret of why we need that yet, but if you have a piece of chalk, it will help you a lot with this painting. And of course, a towel or two. I like to use this to wipe my brushes off once I use the water. And I also have a bigger towel that I'll use to lay down and protect my working space. And that is all you're going to need to get started. So let's just jump into this. All right, so as we jump into this painting, I want to remind you at the bottom of your screen, there is a bar that is slowly ticking down. All that is letting you know that that's how much time we have left until we get to the next section of the painting. I want to encourage everybody to work at their own pace. Pause this video if you need to, slow it down, rewind. The beauty of it is I'm your private instructor, but you tell me when you need to go, and that's how that works. So as we get started, we're going to start with just some basic water. We're going to put water on top of this. We're doing a thin layer. So as I spread this water around, I'm making sure that there's no excessive droplets or anything like that. I just want a thin layer of water. And this is going to help us spread our paint around. We're going to be mixing some colors here in a moment, and this water is just going to make the whole process so much easier. You just don't want to use too much. Now as I jump into this, we're going to use my phthalo blue, like I said, or just your blue, whatever blue you're using. We're going to create a sky here. I'm putting out these X's. You don't have to make X's, I'm just doing it for fun, but I'm putting out little sections of paint. It just makes it so I can spread it around easier versus just starting in one spot. And I'm gonna cover this entire canvas with this blue paint. If you put enough water on there, you're gonna see that this paint spreads really nicely. You don't have to work it too much. If you find that it's not spreading at all, maybe you didn't use enough water, or maybe you don't have enough paint. The end goal here is just to at least cover this whole canvas and make it solid blue. I am a little stickler for brush strokes. You're gonna see me have a little OCD moments in this section, but I always paint the sides of my painting and I always cover the whole canvas here. But I like my brush strokes to be nice and even. Up to you however you want to play with it. But I have to smudge it around a lot. I pretend like I'm sweeping a floor is a good way to put that. You may find that you have to add some paint as you do this, and that's okay. You do want to use, I don't want to say a lot of paint, but we want enough to cover this surface. Our goal is to make sure that the white of this canvas isn't just popping through. You are going to have brush strokes, it's just a natural thing of it, but as I do this, I have to make sure everything's even. I'm doing my best to just make sure everything's even. All right, now that we have covered this in blue, we're gonna take a little bit of the white that we have, and we're gonna kind of create a horizon. I'm spreading this paint around with my little crosshairs or my cross hatches here, just so this paint gets distributed evenly. But we're gonna lighten up this blue by adding this white and creating kind of a gradient to this sky. So by the time we look at this lower level, or this lower portion, is going to be nice and bright blue, and it should almost give you the feeling like it's cold outside. You know, like a nice early morning when it's cold outside, maybe 20, 30 degrees below, and you're inside with a fire. This, not so much. Can't forget to do my edges. Gotta do my edges. People ask me a lot if there's right or wrong. There's not. I'm not gonna frame this painting. It's gonna hang on my wall probably, but I like those edges to be painted. Up to you if you wanna do that or not. And then I'm going to slowly bring this white into the blue. See, if I have too much, I'm really trying to achieve a gradient here. I want it to be nice and light blue on the bottom and then get darker and darker as it goes up. That's why I'm not starting with this white from the top, but I'm gonna slowly work it upwards until I find that it's a nice transition. You definitely don't want to have it to where just one half of it's dark blue and the other half of it's light blue. I don't think it's a good idea to show where each of those tones start. So I'm just gonna slowly just work it up towards the top and let the white paint run out. In fact, I'm gonna add, I went a little too far here, I'm gonna add some blue to this just to help that gradient out. Really the long-term goal with this one here, just make sure it's blending and it doesn't jump too fast between the two colors of blue. And I might need to take a second just to sit here and work these colors together. Take as long as you need. The next thing that I'm doing here that I've noticed some of my students have done differently is doing your brush strokes. I'm doing them in really long, like I want to cover most of the length of the canvas with each one of these brush strokes just to help the blending be a little more seamless. You can do short little brush strokes, but you want to probably be consistent with it if you do that. I like using these long strokes because it really helps blend the background really nice and even, and you're not going to have a lot of brush strokes or mismatching colors. All right, next section. What we want to do here, I'm mixing some white and black together. We want just a gray. I'm not going to use too much black. I just took a little edge of it and I'm mixing it into one of my white piles here. And this gray color is going to be our background trees. So I turn the brush vertically. You don't want to use the wide end of this. You want to use it as if it's one vertical brush there. And I'm going to make just thin trees. It does not have to be a perfectly straight line. In fact, it shouldn't be, because these are trees. And birch trees, they bend and flex in everywhere within their trunks. So there's no right or wrong here either. We're just going to make some gray lines. And as we lay this paint down, it might mix with your background just a little bit, or you might be picking up some of that blue. That's okay here. This is actually gonna help us create depth in the long run. So if those two paint colors mix, you're good, it's fine. I'm just gonna do a few skinny ones here, like they're baby birch trees growing up. And then we're going to turn our brush the other direction here in just a moment and make some bigger ones. And I'm gonna keep using this vertical side of the brush and make just some little branches that come out on some of these. And I'm just trying to fill in some of these areas where the paint didn't quite take. And there's some spots right up in here as well. You can see that the paint didn't fully come down. So all I'm doing at this point is just trying to make sure I fill in these tree trunks so they're solid shapes, and add a few branches. I don't want them to look like they're see-through. Even if we are picking up some of that blue, that's okay. We just don't want this to look like you can see right through them. I'm doing some short little jabby strokes through here as well, just to make sure I fill in that part so it's not as see-through. And add a stem. That easy. So please do as many of these as you'd like, or as little. I'm gonna stick with probably just these 4. I'm mixing a little bit of yellow in here too. We're only gonna use the yellow once outside of this, and I'll go over that later, but if we add a little bit of yellow, just a tiny bit, you don't want too much, it creates just a slight little extra bit of tonality in here. You don't have to do it that way. Just kind of a nice trick to try to get some extra colors in here, and so it doesn't look like we're just using a white brush. You should obtain kind of this 3D look just from using this little trick. And you might find that when you're doing this, not all the paint comes off in one. It's definitely not for me, so I have to go back over these just a few more times. Again, the end goal here being is that you can't see through them. That blue being there is again, looks pretty good actually. We just don't want it to look like it's a see-through tree. And I'm just gonna keep picking up more white and black, and I'm gonna create just maybe this might be the last one. No, I'll probably put one more, maybe on the left. It's a little empty over there. So let's just fill this in. Lots of trees. So the goal here is either that these skinny trees look like they're a little bit further away, or maybe they're just baby trees. Really, it's whatever you want to put down in here. You could put lots or just a little. I'm going to do this. I think this will be the last one here. I'm just going to fill up this left side. Felt empty to me over there. And when I do start to fill this in, I want everybody to remember that when we make these little branches, we're keeping that vertical side of the brush. We're not going to be using the wide side, because that won't look like branches at all. So I'm gonna just take this time now, and you should do it as well, to just fill in these trees, make sure that you can see all the white. That I think I'm gonna add a little bit more white to these main trees, just to make sure they're bright. We do want these to be bright. We're gonna come back through with some black in a minute. So make sure that these have a nice color to them, whether you're adding a little bit of yellow or just making them gray. I really think it's just gonna look good if we fill it all in and do the best you can. So let's take the time to just work on these trees, make sure they're filled in, add them a little bit of branches to them, and then we'll talk about the next step. As I'm laying in these small little branches off the side of the trunks here, I realized that during the spring, or when everything's full in bloom, they have some leaves and everything looks really pretty with those. That's not what we're trying to capture here. It's gonna be wintertime in this painting. So I'm thinking of how these birds might be perched up on this tree later when we paint that in. And also, what would it be like if it was snowing? Snow would be stuck to the top of some of these branches. So I'm thinking about that as I'm placing them. I'm not thinking of drawing or painting out really large tree trunks that separate, anything like that. The focus later is going to be just kind of the texture of these trees and the birds. So I'm just filling this in. See how now that it's drying, some of that blue came through? That's great, but let's add another layer of white. I'm not gonna cover the whole thing, but I am gonna add a bunch here just so we're gonna get a lot of good textures out of this. We just wanna make sure once we add this black and these other textures that we get some good contrast. If it's dark on dark, it won't look quite the same. And I'm gonna leave some of these trees darker, but for the most part, you should definitely see nice white husks or white tree bark coming off of these. And if you let this dry for a little bit too, then you come back with the wet paint, it'll stick better. So if you're having that trouble where you're adding white paint but it just keeps turning blue, then a great tip I would suggest is just let it dry for a minute, or put a hair dryer to your painting for a couple minutes. And when you come back with this white, it'll stick on top of that paint, no problem. It won't be mixing anymore. One thing that you could see me doing right here is these short little horizontal strokes. I feel that this just is a good way to lay the paint down, but it also captures, the brush strokes capture kind of what would actually be happening in nature. So I'm kind of using that to go in my favor with what these tree trunks would actually look like. I'm also thinking about how the light hits. So just underneath these branches, it would still be darker, like a shadow was there. So I'm not filling in that negative space so much. And I'm almost pretending like I'm actually painting on this bark. So I get the initial white down, but then I'll use these short strokes, these sideways horizontal strokes, to try to capture a little bit of that texture that's in there. So something you can add to your painting or your skills for the future. Just little brush strokes like this. And you might not be able to see it on this camera, but once it dries, and you're looking at your own painting, you can definitely see these brush strokes come out, and it tricks the eye into thinking it's just natural and it's how it's grown on those trees, instead of seeing a bunch of horizontal or vertical strokes like that. Just a little technique to help you out. So I added a little bit more black to this. I do want these little ones to kind of just be a little bit darker and have these bigger trees kind of stand out more. It just creates a nice contrast in my eyes. So I'm just adding a little bit more gray, and kind of, if you want, you can almost blur them out a little bit. If you do want them to look like they're in the background, you can kind of haze out the edges a little bit, but up to you how you want to do it. I think I'm sticking with these ones looking like baby trees. So I'm gonna do the hard lines into these ones as well. But I do want these little ones to be just a little bit darker, just so they don't steal the show. You see on this right one, it still kind of has a little bit of that see-through effect that I'm not wanting to get. It's a fine line between, does it look really good and add some shadow and characteristics, or is it just poorly painted? So I guess I gotta cover it up, I feel, and make it a little more solid. Okay, I think these bigger ones definitely need more than just a couple branches. Some people like to plan out where they're going to put the birds as you're painting this. It's a good idea. I'm really not sure where I'm going to put these birds yet, but I am trying to leave a little bit of open space on this blue here so that when we do put a bird in here, we have room to paint them in. I think I'll probably put a bird over on this edge right here. So I'm going to make this a little bit longer. Yep, so that's going to be a branch for a bird to sit on for sure. I think this branch here, we might make an extra snowpack or something on there. Whatever you feel works for you, that's the best plan, honestly. I'm just winging it at this point when it comes to placement of the birds. That's kind of the joy of painting, though, is this should be very relaxing. You should not be. If the biggest worry you have while you're doing this is where the birds are going to go, then you're probably in a good state of mind. It's one of the things I love about painting, is how relaxing it can be. Maybe that one has extra branches coming out. I don't know. Like I said, I'm winging what these branches look like. Okay, our meter has run out, which means it's time to put in the next step. Now, you're gonna load up your brush with some black. You're not gonna use a lot. You wanna make sure your brush is kind of dry. And as we do this, I'm gonna do, remember that short dragging technique I was talking about earlier? We're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna go up the side of the tree, and we're just gonna let some of this black just naturally roll off. We're not gonna try to paint this whole thing black. We wanna have this scraping effect. As I get across the branches here, I'm just adding shadows to the bottom of the branches just to give them more depth. And then I'm gonna go back down the other side and add just some streaks here too. So again, I gotta talk about this a little bit more. You can use a palette knife if you want to do this. I feel it's quite easy if you just use this big brush. I just dab the edges into the black, get some black on there, and I'm very, very lightly touching the canvas. I am not pushing or putting a lot of pressure on this at all or pushing hard. I'm just adding just tiny little bits of pressure. See, the harder you push, the more black is gonna come off. So as I go up the sides of this is important. You wanna do these horizontal strokes. This isn't gonna work if you go up and down and push really hard. This is a very light, like you're scratching. If you had to pretend you were actually in this scene and you're brushing these things on, you would just think that you're kind of scratching this into the bark. And this is the cool thing, since we're doing a bunch of trees, you can get better and better as you go. So start with maybe a tree branch or tree that you're not super happy with, or maybe they all look great. I don't know, you get a lot of practice in this way. Let's put a little black on the bottom end. And I'm just gonna go up the side again. You're just gonna grab. Now I am left-handed, so if you're right-handed, hey, there's no right or wrong. You don't have to do this the same direction as me. You can go up the left side of the tree and pull towards the right side of your painting, and you will get the same effect. So no matter if you're left or right-handed, just pull whatever direction is comfortable for you. Again, just lightly scratch this black into there. From a left to right or a right to left, a horizontal angle. And there are a couple spots where I do push a little bit harder. I want to make this have a lot of variation. This will be easy. I'm not going to put almost any detail on these back ones, or these small ones, because I want the focus to be on these big trees. And this is why we want it to be white. You can see how beautifully this looks like actual birch trees and their bark peeling off. I'm just scratching some of these shapes in. Just like that. Now I'm gonna come back and forth. I'm gonna balance this the way I want to as well. So I might come back here later with a little bit of white, so to cover up any black that I think I did too strong. So that's another cool thing about painting this way. If you felt you made too big of a black mark, and I'm gonna do one on purpose in a little bit here just so you guys can see, but if you do too much of a black mark, you can always come back with the white, and you can do the same technique using the white. You just want to be careful not to blend these colors. There should definitely be a contrast. So if you do it, wait for it to dry just a little bit, and then we'll come back and do more of that. Again, just putting some extra shading on the bottom of the branches. Very minimal detail here on these back ones. Again, I don't want them to steal the focus. They should just fill in that space, and it kind of balances how this whole thing looks. So very little, just gonna go up the whole little tree there, boom. Right here, just very little. I'm doing short, jagged motions. I don't want to go across the length of what this looks like. In fact, if this is difficult, please feel free to switch to that smaller brush that we were talking about, that smaller brush that looks just like this. You can use that as well. And as you can see, I'm doing a few extra hard marks on this tree, and it still looks kind of natural, which is cool. All right, I'm gonna continue to work on these, and you do the same, and I'll start giving you more tips as they come. Okay, here's a good point right here where I got towards the top of this tree and I definitely pushed too hard. I didn't scratch enough. And so I think I'll use this tree later as an example of how we can come back with our white and fix that. So again, don't freak out if you've got too much black or you didn't grab quite the effect that you're looking for. We're gonna be able to fix it. I'm still gonna add in my normal hash marks here, these normal scratching motions, but we will be able to fix any of this. Let's just finish out the rest of these trees before we come back and worry about any details. There we go, a little bit of extra black there too. I'm gonna be able to do a few of these with some extra white too, just so you have a good example. Don't forget to put shadows on the bottom of those branches. And when I say shadows, just, you know, a darker line than white, even if it's a dark gray. I mean, we are gonna come back with a little bit of white later, so it's okay if you go a little heavy on this black, but try to give these branches some dimension by adding that black line or the dark line just underneath them. And then, like I said, grabbing this smaller brush, we can do a few more details, but I'm gonna come through and do some touch-ups. So I'm grabbing this white, and I'm gonna come back over. I'm gonna highlight the tops of these branches just to get some more contrast for those shadows we were just talking about. And this is kind of a touch-up stage. You don't necessarily have to go through it. If you love the way your trees look, you don't have to do this next part. This is just like I was wanting to show you guys. You can grab a little bit of white and kind of scratch out some of those extra dark areas you made. You can even come through and add a little shadows. If some of you are kind of more advanced painting there and you can blend the white and black together and kind of create some shadows around the edges. But if you don't know what I'm talking about, please don't don't go and try to do it. It's okay. It was just a little extra tip. I'm just taking this white and I'm just scratching in some white on these parts that I felt were really too dark, or I accidentally pushed too hard with my brush. And I'm going to also get the tops of all these branches just so we have that standout contrast. Don't put snow in there yet. You're going to be tempted to. We will get to that point. Snow's going to be later. Right now, we just want to make sure these trees look like, good-looking trees. And I'm just cleaning up the edges now. Some of these areas look to me kind of sloppy. I want to just make sure that we have a nice defined edge on some of these trees. And it doesn't look like just blurry paint. So I'm just doing some cleanup now. Making sure my edges are solid. And making sure that there's a nice balance between these white colors and these black tones that we're working with. Again, we're not working on any new material. No, we're not adding snow, we're not adding birds. We are just making sure that the lights and the shape of these trees are good enough to your very own standards. Let's put it that way. Now, chalk. Now we're gonna draw on our birds. But the good thing would be is to let it dry first. Let this thing dry, because we're about to use chalk. I have my own nice little heat gun here. This is a very powerful one. I usually use it on shoes. Be careful when you use one of these. They're very powerful. You could melt your canvas in your painting. So make sure you're keeping it moving and you fan it. If you don't have one of these, that's quite okay. You can use a hair dryer, and if you don't have a hair dryer, you can just give it some time. It's acrylic. It will dry after a few minutes. You can fan it with your paper plate, all kinds of ways. But the first thing we do before we do this, chalk and anything else, or add snow, whatever, we want this to be dry. That way anything that we add to this will not get mixed in, and that is our purpose why we don't want to mix it in with any of the paint that we've already laid down. I am very happy with how this looks, so let's not mess it up. Now, if you have a dry canvas, I'm gonna go ahead and clean my brush off. I'm gonna get just pure white, and I'm going to add snow on top of these branches. Now I'm pretending like I'm actually in the scene and I'm laying down snow on top of these branches. If you can think in a three-dimensional space, I feel like the closer to the trunk that the snow fell, that's where it would kind of build up and get stuck. So I'm just lining now these branches with snow. Now, if you did this right, that white and black from the branches should have mixed. You should have some gray looking branches. And then when you lay this down, the reason that we have to have this dry is this white now is pure white, and it's not going to mix with those other colors we just laid down. So you can even put a bunch, if you grab a big glob of white and push it down there and don't even spread it around, once it dries, you'll actually have some texture on here too that will make it look like snow might have literally fallen onto your painting. And there we go. I'm just gonna go around and add some snow to all these branches. And I feel like the deeper, the higher the angle of that branch is going up, maybe the higher the snow would have built up back there. So like this one, I'm gonna put a little extra in there because it looks like, boom, like those are some big tree trunks and it caught a lot of snow. I don't know. I'm really just having fun with it. I hope you are too. I'm not gonna talk for another minute. I'm gonna just add some snow down here and we'll talk about the next part. Yeah, I'm gonna add some more white too. I think I like that adding a bunch of chunks idea. So just have fun with it. Pretend you're laying snow in your forest and you should be having a good time. And I'll start talking again soon. As I'm laying the snow down, I'm just kind of touching up some of these edges with this pure white since it's dried. I'm just trying to achieve a little bit more texture. I'm going over these dark parts, like I said. I didn't like that it almost looks like burnt trees, or they look like Dalmatian trees instead of tree bark. So I just want to clean up, make them look a little bit more tree-like and get some of these dark spots to not be as bold or stand out quite as much. And then maybe add a little more snow and some branches. I'm just having fun with it. And I hope you are too. This next step we're about to do, since this meter is about run out, we're ready to start the next section. After I add some shadows here, we're going to do our birds. So there we go. Now that looks like snow sitting on a branch instead of just one big black clump, big white clump. I don't know. It looked too clumpy. There. I'm thinking of it too much. Here we go. So let's talk about those birds. Go ahead and clean off your paintbrush. Make sure you're dry again here. If you're gonna paint over the snow, you wanna make sure it's dried, but I'm gonna draw these birds in here. And how I'm doing this is I'm thinking of just making ovals. Now we're doing cardinals as well, so they have kind of this teardrop head shape. And we draw a tail. So I'm gonna draw a couple more so we'll go over what we're seeing here. But on a branch, find a branch that works for you, like this one over here, and you're gonna draw an oval. Think of it as like a quarter kind of turned on its side, and then you do a teardrop head, and then of course a square tail, like the tail's just hanging out behind the branch there. So you're just going to do like a letter U, or what looks almost like a staple hanging out just underneath it. So kind of a turning quarter, a half corner, half of a circle. I'm kind of shaping its wings in here as well, but a half circle, kind of a staple behind it, and that's all we need. Just kind of a faint outline. We're not going to do bird portraits today, but we are going to make sure they're in here. So now we're going to fill them in with white. I hope you remember the shape because we're just gonna fill the whole thing in. Fill it in with white. Now the reason we're doing this is because if we went in and just painted red over this, it would be really opaque and almost kind of see-through. And you would still see the blue sky behind them. The red would not pop or be vibrant at all. So I'm laying down a primer layer and just filling it in with white. We will come back and paint red over this later and you're gonna see the difference. It just pops so much better. Now the reason you're using chalk is if you don't like how it came out, you can just wipe it away. Grab your towel or a little piece of paper towel or tissue paper and you can wipe away this chalk and you can start all over again. So that's another good reason to remember that your painting should be dry, but when you start this step. And just draw the birds in how you want. We're almost like a silhouette or a shadow of the bird. We're not capturing too many details of this bird. I do want to keep the trees as kind of the focus here. The birds is just a nice accented touch. A little add, a splash of color. So make as many birds or as little amount of birds as you want. But use that chalk to practice it until you get a shape that you want. And once you have that shape, we're gonna fill it in with white. And we're gonna let that part dry once we're done with this white, and we're gonna come back with some red and yellows and blacks to fill in the Cardinals shape. If you get the general shape, whoever's looking at it, their brain will do the rest of the work and know that you got a good looking bird there. So as you see, no standing details, just kind of the teardrop head, a half circle for the body, and a square tail at the end. So now we're gonna add some red, and watch this, we're just gonna fill this whole thing in with red. So if you wait and this white's dry enough, the red won't mix with the white, it'll just come right down on top of it. And all of a sudden we have magically appeared a cardinal head. We got the cardinal wings here. So I'm gonna paint these in just like the snow or anything else, like I'm actually in there laying down these shapes, because we want our brush strokes to match what we're doing here. We don't want to just randomly fill it in. That way our brush strokes will actually match. I will fill it in a little bit here, but I'm gonna go over it again with my brush strokes so that it matches what these feathers would be doing in nature. We're gonna fill in the other bird here. And so this is a nice little trick of the eye, like I said. We're not doing anything but basically painting in the silhouette or the shadow of what this bird would look like. Super simple. Keep it simple and it's gonna look really good. Oh, when you fill in the tail, make sure you don't fill in the branch, because that tail would probably fall behind the branch unless the bird is facing away from you. That's kind of important. I should have mentioned this earlier. I apologize, but do not fill in that branch. Leave that branch open between the bird and the tail so it looks more like real life. If you've already done that and covered up the branch, that's okay. It's gonna make it look like the bird's facing away from us. You just don't put a face on it. Let it be how it is, like that. We will be putting faces on these little guys, but we wanna get this filled in first. And again, I'm painting it as like I could see the wings. And I like cardinals. I like picking this one just because it looks like they're punk rock cardinals. Punk rock birds, I mean. Okay, so I'm gonna add just a little bit of blue in here. This is gonna, if you mix your red and blue, you're gonna get a purplish color. And this I'm going to just add to create some depth or some shape. So I'll do like the underside of the bird, maybe the bottom or the left side of the tail. And I'm just mixing in just a little bit of this, just so it's not solid red. But this gives us, again, the illusion of form. Maybe right underneath the head to separate the body from the head. You can put a little there. And then we'll come back later on the other side, like the top side of the bird, and we'll add a little bit lighter red or yellow colors to make them be brighter. So right now we're just focusing on shadows though. Add that kind of purplish color towards the bottom of your bird just to give it just a little bit of shape and color there. Now I'm going with black. I am actually wetting my paintbrush and then rolling it in the paint first. If there's a little water in this paint, it'll come off the brush really easy. Now Cardinals have a black square, black mask kind of on their face. And that's what I'm adding here. I'm just putting a square dot in the middle of their head there. And then later we'll add their beaks coming out of that part. And I'm just adding more shadow since I got this black. I'm just gonna add just a tiny bit just to create a little bit more shadow on those birds. There, simple. It's really easy to overthink this stuff and it's not that hard if you keep it simple. Now I'm going back with white again because if we put this yellow right there where the beak would be, then you wouldn't be able to see it because of that black we just put down. And it's not taking because it's still wet. I gotta let this black dry a little bit. So if you're painting along with me, now's a good point to pause it. Make sure the black square on their face is dry. You're gonna have a tough time putting any color on it if it's not. So let's dry it. I gotta dry it. None of that shape was taking. I'm going a little too fast. If you're painting along with me, just make sure at this point your bird's dry because we're gonna put some more white in here to make sure that the yellow beak stands out and you can see it really good. We might put some feet in here. I had a really wet, but I used too much water when I rolled that black paint in there. So if we're keeping it simple, we just want to put the black dots on there and now we're going to add the beaks. Here we go. So white, that's just where the beak is going to be. Now this is just like a tiny dot, like a little hash mark, and that's it. I'm not trying to draw a fancy triangle or anything else in here. It's just using this detail brush and putting a single hash mark right in the middle of that black dot. Then we will come back with some yellow, and because we put that white there, that yellow should pop out and be bright, and we don't have to fight this to make this look the way we want. And there we have it. Cardinals. Bing. Just add a little more black since that was a little too watery. See, we all make mistakes, it happens. That's what I love about painting, is you can always fix it. And then dry your masterpiece. If you see some chalk marks left over from your painting, make sure your painting is dry. And if you still see those chalk mark pieces, you can wipe them away with a little piece of towel like this. But please, please, please make sure you have dried everything before you try this, or you'll ruin those birds that you work so hard on. But this is what I love about chalk. It can make an excellent framework for us, and then we can erase any lines that we use to show that they were even there. And I'm gonna finish this up, but we're about done. Just make sure it looks the way you want and you're happy with it. Remember, this is your world, it's your fun. Do what you want with it. I'm gonna add a little bit of happy feet in here. Happy feet, happy feet, happy feet. And I think we're gonna call this close to done. Oh, I forgot the light part on the bird. I'm gonna add a little bit of yellow and red. I'm gonna mix these together just to create kind of a light orange color, and I'm just gonna put some highlights on the back of these birds, maybe the top of the head, just again to give them a little bit more form and dimension. I'm only sticking to the top part of the bird or the edges yeah. Beautiful birds. And there you have it. A nice completed painting, relatively quick. And man, those are some good looking birds. Hey, if you haven't forgotten to yet, please like, subscribe, comment, share with your friends, smash all those buttons for me so we know that you're out there. And whether you painted along with me here today or if you just watched, I want to thank you sincerely, and we'll see you next time.